to the podcast. Very excited for you to meet today's guest. You maybe have met him before. His name's Brian Bridges. He's from Lake Hamilton School District in the Arkansas area, doing really big things. And we're going to talk all about back to school communication, a little bit about social media, but breaking it really down. Brian's going to start with giving us an update of how many submissions he got with his magic method. And it's not so magic, he's going to share it. And so if you are looking for more stories from your staff this year, you are going to want to listen. Okay. Then we're going to break down what he includes in his back to school mailer. Exactly. We have actually got so many resources in the show notes as well. But you'll see what he includes, some QR codes. He's got some great advice for a method to keep up with the changing needs or the updates to information. So he's got some brilliant ideas there. And then we'll dive into some of the training that he provides to his staff, to his administrators, to his student athletes, going into the new year with school communication. And we kind of end it with some mindset shifts, and your job's challenging. Brian's going into his 10th year as a school communicator, and there's still some things that he has to do on a daily basis. And he's going to share how he kind of keeps the right mindset to stay excited and helpful and all of the things. So you're going to want to listen to the end. You're probably going to want to take notes, and you're definitely going to want to check out the show notes because there's incredible value and examples of what he talks about. Okay. Now, I hope that you are subscribed to this podcast, and I hope that there is, our whole purpose of sharing these podcasts is for you to take action and feel empowered. And after this podcast, and if you take some action, I want to hear from you. But I just want to share a recent email that I had gotten from Tammy Kimberly. She is out of the state of Washington, and she emailed me and the guest that was on that show. It was podcast number 196 with Aaron Woodeel. And she said, Andrea and Aaron, I wanted to thank you both for the deeply insightful podcast this week, Simple Steps to Up Level Your Storytelling. I was listening to it as I was on the treadmill, ironically, as Andrea actually mentioned that during the recording, and I couldn't wait for it to end so I could look up the reels and see what Aaron was talking about. While our district has been experimenting with reels ever since I heard Andrea speak at WASPRA over a year ago, I've been intimidated to take the next step in intentional video storytelling. Aaron, you broke down the steps and shared insights I needed to feel more confident. Andrea, you asked the perfect questions that I was also wondering in my mind as I listened. I approached our HR director the very next day and shared your examples, and we are both excited to explore how we can use this to raise the level of storytelling and recruitment in our district. She talked about the great ideas, talked about our great chemistry on the podcast, and she wanted us to do another show together so that we could share some more insight. You guys, thank you, Tammy, for sharing that insight. You guys, that's what this podcast is all about. So make sure you subscribe and please share this episode. Okay. Share this episode with other schools that need the information to improve their school communication. Okay. Sharing is caring. So hit the share button on somebody that needs to hear this. And we would love a podcast review if you are so inclined as well. Now let's get into this week's K-12 PR tip. All right, today's K-12 PR tip is all about back to school. Okay, we've got lots of back to school things that we're thinking about communicating. And when it comes to social media, this is the one time of year that it is okay to share out information with a flyer, possibly with a little notice. But consider using video. And the video could come from an administrator, it could come from a principal, it could come from another student that is sharing some of that same information that might be on a flyer, but it's in a little bit different way, and it might catch the attention. Don't forget to put a good little line text on that video right from the start, right from the first frame that says, back to school details for open house or whatever you're trying to share. Okay. Let them know what you're going to be talking about, but change it up. And it doesn't have to be perfectly edited. We've talked about this before. But using video in addition to any other types of information that you do share, great strategy. Also, don't share it just once and think you're good. You can share it multiple times. The algorithm's tricky and not everybody's going to see every post that you share. So you definitely want to share that out, and you can share it on posts. You can share it on reels. You can share it in stories, right? There are a lot of different ways to showcase that, but think about video in getting some of your back to school information. Okay. You are going to get a ton of tips on back to school communication from today's guest. So let's get started. Welcome back to the podcast, Mr. Brian Bridges.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I am so excited. You shared some incredible advice back in episode 112. I'm really going to urge people to go back and listen to that. But it's that time of year already to start thinking about back to school. So we're going to focus on that today. But before we get started, can you just share your background and your role there at Lake Hamilton?
So I just finished my 10th year as the Director of Communications for the Lake Hamilton School District, and we're located in Piercy, Arkansas. We're one of, I believe we are number 22 out of 285-ish districts in Arkansas as far as size.
Okay.
So we're considered one of the largest in Arkansas. Prior to me, there was not a communications person for the district, so this was a position that they created, and then they transferred me to it. I was a 5-year math teacher, and then now I've been in this role for 10 years. So 15 years are in the books. We just finished my 15th year. And like you said, as soon as you finish or conclude a school year, you immediately begin working on the next year. So I'm already working on all of my back to school items and back to school pre-service schedules and development, and the fun just continues.
Yeah, exactly. Just new projects to work on. You say you're number 22 in size. Can you give me an enrollment number approximately?
So Arkansas school districts are smaller. Our total enrollment is a little over 3,900 students, K
Okay.
through 12. Your largest district, they're going to have between 10 and 20,000 students, but those are very few. Like your top 8 school districts in Arkansas will have those, but
Okay.
the majority are our size, and then they get a little smaller.
Okay. Well, I think you've done some amazing work there at Lake Hamilton over the last 10 years. I've been lucky enough to be connected with you for probably 7 of my 10 years. We're
Yes.
both celebrating 10 years, Brian.
Yay!
Yay.
10-year anniversary.
We and I'm sure you could write a book. I mean, I wrote a book, but you could write a book on all of the things that you've dealt with and been through and all of those things. But one of the most infamous things, especially in my little network that I share, is the way that you get content. You're a one person shop. You have how many different schools?
So I'm a one-person shop. I'm a party of one, I always say. And we've got 6 different school buildings. All of our buildings are broken up with 2 grades per building,
Okay.
except our high school, we have 3. And I have a communications representative in each one of the buildings that I train, and they get a stipend. And they run their school social media page, their Facebook page. And but I've got a way that I get content, and I started this is my 4th year, I believe. With this, I created a Celebrate Our School QR code sticker, and it'll have it linked to a jot form, and I have that sticker on every classroom door in the entire district. I physically did that myself. I went to every door. And that is how all of our teachers and staff submit content for social media. And this past year, from August 8th until June 4th, we received 2,348 submissions. And that is the most we've ever received. I never have to search for content. It's the best thing ever. And we will actually have our social media awards during back to school in service in August. So we will have awards. I give awards for the building that submits the most. And then I also give awards per building for first, second, and third place submissions. And it's something they get very excited about.
That's awesome. Sometimes the littlest things can really mean something, but everybody's jaw just dropped when they're like 2,348 submissions in 1 year. Usually the biggest struggle for people is content. Ryan has a proven system that has obviously worked. I also love it because it really keeps things streamlined for you, as far as looking at who submitted what and being able to go back and track and ask questions and whatever, right?
Yeah, it's excellent. You know, I'm a big believer in having the data to back up what you do. And I share that with our teaching staff as well, as this proves that you are wanting to share and get yourself, your classroom out there. It's trackable. And it's also, like you said, streamlined. So when a teacher selects that this is for the primary school, when they hit submit, it automatically, I have it set to send to that primary school representative so that they have that content, but everything is also automatically sent to me as well. And doesn't blow up my inbox. I'm very organized and I'm pretty OCD about things. So I even have it to where any submission that comes to my inbox, it automatically gets filtered to a folder within my email that says celebrate our school folder. So my inbox is not blown up, it's sent to that folder. And then once every couple days, I'll go to that folder and I'll pilfer through and I'll select some of the stories to post on the district level. And of course, all of my representatives are posting as much content as they can on their school level. And it just allows the parents to see what's going on in the schools. The parents are still not necessarily in the schools a lot. And I say still, they've never really been in just a whole lot other than just a party or a conference or an activity. And so this just, again, it allows your parents to see what's going on in school. It just helps with that narrative, writing your own narrative of making sure that you are sharing the good, and you want to share so much good that even when there's that negative out there, because there's going to be negative, there's still that much more good to kind of gobble up the little piece of negative that's floating around.
Yeah. So many of my listeners could stop listening right now and have so much value and have the impact last all year long, but we're going to keep talking, and you go into much more detail, and we've got some links to, what you ask and how you do all of that in episode 112. So go back and listen to that. But this podcast episode, I really want to focus on some of your back to school communication. And so, first of all, I know this is a social media podcast, but we're going to talk about your mailer. So, you have a really unique mailer that goes out to help parents and families know how you're going to communicate this year. So, tell me about that mailer.
I do a mailer. This is about the third or fourth year that I've done this. I started this during the pandemic and I've continued it since. I think it's nice to have a tangible something mailed to your home that's not done a lot. And I think it's something nice to have, especially at the beginning of the school year, to welcome them back to the school year and also have, like I call it, the one-stop shop. And so my mailer, I have a QR code central, and that includes where they can scan and go to where their school nurses are and their contact information, the school counselors, the school calendar, the school board. I've got a communications checklist where there's a QR code where they can scan and subscribe to my weekly newsletter that I do throughout the school year. So they can subscribe to that, download our app, follow us on our social channels. Our superintendent always gives a welcome message for everybody. This past year, I even included a section in there on the power of positive communication. and how they should use our official communication channels, how they should address concerns directly with those involved, how they should avoid posting to social media during conflicts, and how they should stay informed and get involved as much as possible. We also include a QR code where they can find out open house information. I found that doing a QR code pointing to a web page for open house information is more beneficial than printing out the open house information, because just like anything that we learned during the pandemic, change is inevitable. And that QR code, while it could point to that web page, I can update that web page where I can't update this printed graphic. And so that's one reason I do that as well. I go over the first day of school, how we provide school supplies, anything they might need. We do a little checklist of what they need for school. I have a section on athletics that goes over how much it is to attend athletic events, the athletic calendar, a little link for them to view the athletic calendar, and then also our free meals, because you always want to make sure you're pushing your students to apply for that free meals. It helps not only them because they need to be fed, but also it helps your school because your percentages on free meals, that helps with your funding as well. So, and then some special services information in our after school program. So it really, I try to encompass everything in a 4-page mailer. And
Okay.
so it's a very small 4-page little mailer that's folded in half and sent out. And I think that it's got some good information that hopefully they utilize.
Would it be okay if we would copy at least last year's mailer?
Sure, yeah.
We'll put that in the show notes. That'll be good. And I may already have that link, but mine might be 2 years old. I'm not sure. Um, I love the fact that you pointed out sometimes you don't print all the information, you give them a QR code. I think everybody in at least one person in a household has a phone. They know how to use QR codes. It's easy to get to that information, and you're right, there are going to be changes, so don't print something out that is likely to get updated. That's why we don't send out calendars in the mail anymore, because there's just too many updates. How
Even last year, our school calendar changed. Our
Yeah,
school calendar we had the major eclipse, and everyone thought it was going to be the world shutting down to view this eclipse. And so all of our emergency management and law enforcement personnel met with us and our superintendent at the beginning of the school year and begged us to change our calendar and move that school day to where that day was an off day, and then we would have another day. And so we changed our calendar in September.
mhm,
So there's always change. Change
yeah,
is inevitable, and it used to bother me a lot with all the change happening, but during the pandemic, we were constantly pivoting and pivoting and pivoting, and I think it just transitioned everyone to be a little bit more accepting to change.
right. And developing systems that easily adapt to it, which you've done.
Correct.
When do you send out this mailer?
I send out the mailer. I like it to hit their mailboxes August 1st.
Okay.
We usually, if it hits August 1st, our first day this next school year will be August 13th. So if it hits
Okay.
August 1st, that gives them a little bit to look at their open house dates and prepare. If I send it too soon, it's going to get lost in the shuffle. I want it to be sent as they're also thinking about school as well.
Okay. And I'm sure, I mean, some of that information is obviously available digitally before that mailer
Correct.
hits.
So all of that information typically is available on our website,
Okay.
in our socials, and digital newsletters beginning in July. But as you know, people don't search out information anymore. It's instant gratification.
Yeah.
It's how everyone likes to be. And so it's got to be a little spoon fed
Yeah.
to make sure that they get it. And
Okay.
you got to utilize all your channels. You got to utilize your socials, your webs, your print, all the things.
Yeah. How do you create it? Do you create it in
I
Canva or what?
created in Canva.
Okay.
Canva is wonderful. And that way each year I can just copy that template over and then
Update.
obviously redesign and update it. So every year it has a new look, but I
Yeah.
do create it in Canva. Canva's wonderful. Canva, you can just go in and search whatever topic, and I put in newsletter and it'll pull up all of my old newsletters and I search through. It's a great system. I hope it never crashes.
Yeah. No, well, didn't it just have a crash? I think there was just issues with it, right?
It did, but it was short-lived.
Okay, yeah. It's just like when Facebook goes down and all of a sudden you're like, "Oh my gosh."
Uh-huh.
Everybody can get something else done in their lives, which
Yes.
is a good thing. Um, you really are your, kind of district's go-to person. And so I'm just wondering a few other like back to school things that you do around communications. I know you even get into helping your student athletes with some guidance. So can you tell me a little bit about what you do to prep your student athletes and how you do
Well,
that?
I meet with everyone from our district administrators to our coaching staff to our new teachers. I meet, and then our entire district staff.
Okay.
I meet face to face with all of those people to go over expectations, training, and even though you may have worked here my entire 10-year tenure, there are some things that I go over each and every year because I want to make sure that they are aware that this is our protocols and policies. So that's one of my biggest piece of advice to those that are in this position and that are new to being your social media managers or your communications directors is it's not a set it and forget it type of job to where I told them once, I trained them once, and that's it. It takes constant training. And so when I meet with our coaching staff, I go over all of my communication, not only expectations, I want to make sure they know that we are a team and I want to help promote what they are doing and how a lot of times you'll hear that there is a connotation that you are favoring one program over the other. You always hear that in schools. Well, of course, there's another post about the band, or there's another post about baseball. Whereas in reality, there's another post about band or another post about baseball because the band director or the baseball coach, they're sending content. And so I'm then able to share that content out on all of our channels. So I let them know that if they want their program represented, they've got to actually share that information with me. And among that with coaches, I share interview tips with athletes. Not only is media our news media, which is, your television stations, your newspapers, your radios, media encompasses social media. And the athletes are now on the forefront with social media and they're influencing others and they're representing themselves in their school. So I've created a one page, just a tip for interview tips for athletes that I went over with the coaches and with the athletes this year about how they share praise when they're speaking either on social media or to the media and how everyone on the team had a hand in the victory. So we want to make sure we're sharing praise, how they need to be confident, excuse me, but not cocky. We want to look good in an interview and we want to show confidence in our answers, but we also want to remain humble while we do that as well. How our athletes are always on. Just because they don't see a mic or a camera, they're always on because everyone always has a phone and it just takes 2 seconds for someone to push record and hear a conversation or something that they say. And in the culture, I call it cancel culture, you can be canceled over one wrong thing that you say and one person hears. How they don't need to blame the officials on it's tough when you lose, but we never keep the officials out of our conversations. We want to keep it short. Sometimes you want to elaborate, and when you elaborate, sometimes your long-winded answers they can be taken out of context. And so we want to just get to the point when we're answering with the media. And a lot of people aren't going to sit there and listen to that much content. So keep it short. And then I always tell them represent the wolf way. You're representing yourself, your family, your team, your school, your community by how you act and your body language and how what you say verbal and what you text, type, social is representing all of those groups. So we want to represent the wolf way is what we call it.
I love it. And we'll be able to share that little handout in the notes, right? Is that okay?
For sure. Yeah.
Um, some of these things you would think would be common sense or whatever, but until you really write them down and have these kids really reflect on it, it isn't. And I think
Andrea,
even
what I've learned in education is there's no common sense anymore. And that's with our even adults at times, with
yeah.
students, common sense lacks at times. That's why you have to train.
Mhm. Yeah, and whether you've been doing this 1 year or 10 years or 20 years, they need to see you during back to school. So, you also talked about your staff. So, are there a few things that you make sure to cover with your staff? You already kind of talked about you do the awards, which obviously has
Right.
to get them excited about this year,
Right,
right?
right. So I do. I meet with all of our new teachers. So we have a new teacher induction. So I have a training where I meet with just them and I go over all of our policies and procedures and how we do things. I go over our QR code, how they submit content and how we track that. And even during the year, I send out every Wednesday, I send out a staff memo. And during the year, about mid-year, I'll send out a list of congratulations to these employees who have submitted at least one piece of content this year. And I list names by building on those that have submitted content. And the reason I do that is because I want others to know that we're watching. We want you to submit. We want you to share what's going on in your classrooms, and it's data that we're looking at. So I introduce their building level um, representatives, making sure they know who they are. I go over our permission to publish, making sure that they're aware of our permission to publish and how even if you're running let's say the baseball team, they run their own Facebook page. Well, they have to put a disclaimer on that baseball page, letting the public know that it's not a page run by the Lake Hamilton School District, and there's the contact information for who's running it. And there's a little part on there as well that goes over how any information is not necessarily improved or endorsed by the school district because I don't have someone trained running that page. And so I want to make sure when a random parent calls the front office and says, hey, I saw this information on this page, we can go to that page and we can immediately see who's in charge of it and send them to that person.
Mhm.
I go over our branding with the staff. I think that's important to go over, especially with your social media posts or any sort of graphics that you do, but having that consistent brand. And I make that readily available to our staff. I put all of our brand guidelines, I put all of our logos, our word marks, our color codes in a Google folder, and that's shared with them at the beginning of the school year. And it's also on our website. So I'll link it on
Okay.
our website to where they have those branding guidelines because again, you work hard at keeping that consistent look, that consistent image. And I still have things that I have to go back and train people on with the branding. I had to go to one of our athletic teams this year because they were not using our letters on their hats. And I saw a picture of their hat and it was not our branded letters. And so I sent a reminder that next year when you get hats, make sure you're using our brand guidelines. And none of it's done necessarily out of haste, or I shouldn't say haste, it's done out of haste, just get it done, get the hat ordered. It's not done out of malice, but I think consistent reminders go a long way.
Yeah. Um, is that website link for your branding available for anybody to look at, or is it just
It
on your
is,
intranet?
yes. So
Okay.
yeah, it's on our website and it's under About Us. And
Okay.
so I have an entire branding section And the reason I have it on our website for public is because we have a lot of our community businesses and organizations that create branded items for the school. And so that way it's readily available for them.
Okay. Tell me a little bit, just quick, about being in this position 10 years and having to, like you said, it's not done out of malice, but there's people that don't follow the rules and then you have to follow up with them. And sometimes it can feel a little bit redundant and like you're losing the battle, right? It's just like, hey, I'm doing all this work.
It's
It's frustrating. How do you stay kind of motivated and knowing that? I mean, you already talked a little bit about change and how we've just kind of we've had to adapt to say, this position is about change, right? Like, I have to just learn to embrace it. But are there any mindset shifts or anything that you can give us? Because I think you do a pretty good job at this.
it's a constant and it does get frustrating at times. But I also try to have in the back of my mind that all of those that are making these mistakes or not quite understanding our protocols and procedures, they're not the communications person. They are a teacher, they are a coach, they are a club sponsor, they are an administrator. And so I try to keep that in the back of my mind. And all that I do is I feel like my role should be a role of helpfulness and consistent training and positivity. And that's hard. And of course I have those that I vent to, as everyone has to have those that they vent to. I speak with our school staff every year about how they should strive to be an ambassador for our district, and they should be one of the best salespersons for our district. And to properly sell something is to be properly informed. And so I want them to be as informed as possible by reading the information that I put out there. But I also try to make myself as available as possible to help and guide along the way. So while I do send reminders on, hey, just a friendly reminder that this is our policy and procedure on this, and just a friendly reminder, this is our wolf mascot, use our wolf mascot. Just a friendly reminder, our colors are maroon and gold, use maroon and gold. All of those little things, I still try to make sure that I'm in a headspace and in a mindset of, I know that person wasn't doing it with the intention of being wrong. So I need to make sure I go speak to them in a way that is helpful and not harsh.
Hmm.
And I don't know, it is a constant, and you do get frustrated at times because at times I feel like a broken record or a parrot that's saying the same thing over and over again. But you have to say it over and over again so it
Right.
sticks.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I like that. Well, you've given us so much to think about as we go back to school. You're not going to be able to implement this all before this school year, but maybe you can grab a couple tips and then looking forward to next year, you can incorporate even more. I'm sure over the 10 years, everything has evolved for you. As we wrap up, is there any other back to school advice you have for the listeners?
Pre-plan as much as possible. Don't wait until August to start working on your back to school materials. So, like I said, in the summer, that's a perfect time for you to start shifting gears. As soon as school is out, start your preparations on your back to school, schedule out as much as you can schedule out, because the moment the staff come back and the students come back, you are needed. You're needed for training, you're needed for content, you're needed for events. That's one thing with communications professionals that I can always say is the hats that they wear are many. And so you want to make sure you are as prepared as possible and you are not unorganized in what you're doing. So, and that comes from preparation. So I
Right.
would just be prepared, be organized. Organization and preparation, they really make life great.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's hard when you're flying by the seat of your pants.
Yeah, and pretty much you kind of have to in this role, so anything you can pre-plan and organize, you definitely should. Even to the moments of being able to like automatically put things into folders on your email. Brian, by the way, you would probably hyperventilate if you looked at my email inbox. But anyways,
I have two emails in my inbox right now, two,
I do not have
because
two
it's either
emails.
placed in a folder or it's deleted.
Yeah, I like
They
it.
don't get to hang out.
Yes, I love it. You probably just gained a lot of friends from that comment. What's the best way to stay connected to you, Brian? If they've got more questions or they or anything, how should they contact you?
Email is my preferred. Email
Okay,
is my to-do list, and that's one thing that I help train the staff on as well. As I'm going through, I'm walking through the campus. They're like, Brian, I need to do this, or Brian, what can you do this? And I'm always like, email me, that's my to-do list.
right.
And it is. And I always start every day, I start at the bottom and I work my way up as I'm going through my email. And that's my to-do list. That's where I can keep everything straight. I can move things to folders if I need to move them to folders, but that's always my preferred method of contact. Texts are easily overlooked and often misplaced. And so always love a good email contact. So reach out. Happy to help.
Okay, we'll include your email address in the show notes. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. This has been super helpful. We'll get some of the links that Brian shared with us, the mailer, the interview tips, and that website link in the show notes as well. We're planning on crafting this into a little helpful blog as well, so you can get this in a couple different ways. You probably took a bunch of notes. I certainly did. But I think we're gonna have a smoother back to school time with by following some of these tips. So thank you so much, Brian.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, Andrea.
All right, you guys, we'll see you next week. Have a great 4th of July as this is just hitting July 2024, and we will see you soon. Keep telling those stories. Bye bye.